This is the Tree of Life, Season 18, Chapter 3. In this episode, we will be contrasting reverse substitution events and substitution events in the context of the bifurcation of perception. In the last episode, we talked about how natural law can either be the result of an assertion of tautology or an assertion of authority. In this episode, I would like to draw that discussion back into our contrasting of time parsimony and path parsimony. To start off, tautological natural law is generated by a governing authority, which is the in-group. As explained in much earlier podcasts, in-groups are created by synchronous affirmational phases, as between digital structures, or as between digital and analog structures. These synchronous phase shifts were previously described as an affirmational valence. Now, since in the past we associated time parsimony with these synchronous phase shifts, and since we know that affirmational valence prevents the formation of longer strings of parallel structures, we can say that these structures are atomized or digital. On the other hand, path parsimony is governed by hierarchical natural law and represents negational valence, producing longer strings of parallel structures. These structures are analog because they are local and contextual. Now, in past episodes, we described reverse substitution events as occasions where the digital stream corresponding to one's physical representation and the corresponding objects of consciousness oriented around that representation are not the same as those corresponding to the context of the physical vessel. That is, there is a disconnection between one's physical representation and one's physical vessel, whilst one's perceptions are still shaped by the digital stream. In contrast, a substitution event is described by a dislocation of one's perceptions of one's objects of consciousness from one's physical vessel, whilst still remaining within that physical vessel. That is, in this case, we have digital dominance with substitution. In this case, we see the case of causal reordering through the resumption of time parsimony after the conclusion of the substitution event in the transformation of a digital structure to an analog one. In this case, the dislocation of the two streams, the distance, is caused by path parsimony, negational valence, being favored in the digital stream, and time parsimony, affirmational valence, being favored in the analog stream. That is, ordinarily, atomized structures are of an affirmational valence in a reverse substitution event. In a regular substitution event, the digital structures are of a negational valence and the analog structures are of an affirmational valence. Thus, it appears that during a regular substitution event there is an exclusion of the objects of consciousness corresponding to the analog stream by the digital stream, but not the representation of the vessel itself. This makes sense since we saw that only exclusionary structures maintain or capture self-consciousness, and they do so with respect to an impulse in a negational phase. Thus, in the negational state, these digital structures maintain the self-consciousness associated with an impulse without a perception of the analog objects of consciousness. That's the end of the podcast for today.